Hi, in this video we will give an introduction to database systems. Here you see a typical how they handled and stored data in old days. So it's an old-fashioned database system, but this is not how we are doing it today. Today, all kind of information is stored in a database system. So a database is a structured way to store lots of information, and typically the information is stored in different tables. And everything today is stored in databases. Here we have some examples. We have bank account systems, information in web pages such as Facebook, Wikipedia, YouTube, etc. And you have lots of other examples. So try to figure out 5 more examples by yourself. We have lots of database management systems from different vendors. Here are some examples. We have Oracle, MySQL, Database, Sybase, Microsoft Access, or Microsoft SQL Server, which we will focus on in this video. But we have hundreds of different database management systems today. Do you want to start with the database development? Then you typically need the following. So first you need a database modeling tool where you model your database and the tables inside the database. An example of such a tool is Ervin, which we will demonstrate later in this video. And you will need a database management system, as mentioned earlier. And in this video we will use SQL Server from Microsoft as an example. And third, you need a programming language to create an application that communicates with the database. It could be a desktop application, it could be a web page, etc. Here you have hundreds of different programming languages you can use. For instance, you can use LabVIEW from National Instruments, Visual Studio and the C# programming from Microsoft, etc. So let's start with the database modeling part. Here you see an example of an so-called ER diagram, entity relationship diagram, which is used to model a database. Typically you have different tables. In this case you have a table called book and a table called chapter, and then you have relationships between the tables. And here we have a so-called primary key in this table, and then this has a relationship to this chapter table with this foreign key column, like this. So you have the primary key, foreign key, and the relationship between them, like this. The tables can contain one or more columns, like this. Here you see another example where we have some more tables. In this table we have modeled a school system where we have the school table, and on this school we have different courses. And see here we have the foreign key to the school ID, which is the primary key, and the school contains of different classes, and each classes has some students, and you can get grade. Each student can get a grade in the different courses he take. And also each school have a set of teachers, and each teacher are connected to one or more courses, like this. So this database model is made with Ervin, which we will introduce later. We will give a short introduction to Ervin, which is a tool for modeling your database. So Ervin is a tool for database modeling where you create so-called ER diagrams, entity relationships diagrams. You have a specific version called CA Ervin Data Modeler Community Edition, which is free of use. And you can, it has some limitations, meaning you can create only 10 to 5 objects or tables. This edition can be downloaded from this website. Here you see an example in Ervin where I have created 2 different tables. In order to create new tables, you use the entity tool you find in the toolbar. And then, in order to create more columns, you use the tab and enter keys in order to give the tables a name and to create columns. And also you can use the arrows to switch between the columns inside that table, like this. With Ervin, when you are finished with your database model, you can also create an SQL script, and you can use that script and take it to your database management system and insert the tables inside the database management system based on the script. Here you see the same example as previously. This example is created in Ervin. We will create this more simple example in this video where we have 2 tables, one book table and one chapter table. So let's create this example in Ervin. Now I have opened the Ervin software, so I just click File, New, and here first you need to select what type of model. Typically you select both logical, physical, the database management system you're going to use, and the version of that system, and click OK. And then you are ready to create your tables. So let's start with the book table. You use the entity tool, create a table, enter the name of the table, like this, and then you can use the tab key, type the column book ID, which is the primary, should be the primary key, book ID, like this. Next we can create a new column, book table, book title, like this, and then you can use the tab in order to browse through the columns. If you want another column, you can just hit enter, like this. So the last column should be summary, like this. If you want to delete, I made this by mistake, so I just select it and click delete, like this. And we create the next table, the chapter table. We use the entity tool, create the name of the table, chapter, use the tab, chapter ID should be the primary key, book ID should be a foreign key, like this. Create a new column, chapter number, and chapter title, like this. And then you can use the relationship tool in order to create the relationship between them. Like this. So you just click on the primary key table, drag it to the foreign key table, and release the mouse. And then, since you already created the foreign key column, you can just click OK here, and then the relationship between them has been created, like this. Next we want to create the data type for the different columns, so you just right click and select attribute properties, and then we can set the different data types here. So the book ID is typically an integer. So the book ID should be an integer, like this, and this book title and summary typically are a text field, so you can use the char data type, or I prefer the varchar data type, like this. And then you can select how long it should be. Book title 50 characters, summary. The summary could be, let's say 100 or something, like this, and then click close. And then you can do the same for the other table. When we are finished with the tables, we typically want to create an SQL script. So in order to do that, we need to switch to the physical model and select tools, actions, forward engineering and schema. And then you just go through these settings and select the properties or features you want to include in your script. When you are satisfied, you can click the preview, and then you can check if your script is okay or not. When you're satisfied, you can click on the save button, like this. Next, we will focus on the database management system, and in this video we will use SQL Server from Microsoft as an example. So here you see the Microsoft or the SQL Server Management Studio, which is part of SQL Server. So to the left here you have a list of all your databases and the contents inside the database, like tables, views, stored procedures, etc. To the right you can write queries, like you want to get data from a table or enter data into the different tables. The first thing you need to do is to create a new database, so just right click on the database and select new database. And then you need to enter a proper name and click OK. And then you need to start creating tables, so you can do it in at least 3 different ways. So you could use the table script you created with Ervin or other modeling tool, or you can create the tables using the designer tools within the SQL Server Management Studio. And then you can just right click on tables and start creating new tables, and then you enter column names and data types. A third option is to use the database diagram, and then you can just click on the database diagram, new database diagram, and then start to either select existing tables or create new tables from scratch. We will use this the same example in SQL Server, and those 2 tables we will create them within the SQL Server Management Studio. So let's go to Microsoft SQL Server to see how this can be done. Now I have opened the Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and here to the left we have the databases, so I can just right click, new database, and since we are going to create a book table and a chapter table, a proper database name could be library. So you just select, enter the name and click OK, and our database has been created. And now we can click on tables, right click and select table, and then we can start creating our tables. So we can start creating the same columns. We start with the book ID, it should be an integer, book title, etc., and select the proper data type. And then on the primary key we can just right click, select primary key, and then you can click save to enter the name of the table, in this case book, like this. And then we can finish the columns, and then you can create the chapter table in the same manner. So just click on table like this. Another method was to use the database diagram. So first time you just click yes, right click new database diagram, and then click close here, and then you can right click, create new table, name of the table, book, and then start entering the column name, data types, etc. And then start with the second table, chapter, like this, and fill out the column names and data type. So now we have created the two tables, and we select or set the primary key, set primary key in each table, set primary key. And then we want to create a relationship between those tables. So we also need to enter the book ID here. So now each table has the book ID. Here's the primary key, and this should be the foreign key. So we just click on the mouse here on the primary key and to the foreign key, and then we release the mouse like this. So we click on this one and on this one, and then just click OK here, and the relationship has been created between them like this. And now we are ready to use our tables. One more thing that is handy to do for the primary keys, it's a good idea to make the primary key to be just a running number. So we can click on the column, select identity specification and set it to yes, and then every time we enter a new book in this table, this book ID will be created automatically. Same with chapter ID, is identity, yes, like this, and we can save it. And now we are finished. Now we are ready to enter data into our database, and then typically we use the structured query language, shortened SQL, which we will introduce in this part. So what is SQL? SQL is a structured query language. So SQL is a standard language for accessing databases and to manipulate the data. And you have to notice SQL is not case sensitive, so upper or lowercase is the same in SQL. Here we see an example. Select school ID, name from school. In this case we will get data from the school table using the select command. Here you see some other examples. Typically we have 4 different types of queries. We have insert, when we want to insert data into the table. We have the select, when we want to get data from one or more columns in one or more tables. And then we have the update command that we use if we want to change some of the data into the database. And then if we want to delete data, we can use the delete command like this. In our example we will use these 2 tables, and then we will start to insert some data into these tables using the insert command, and then we will retrieve or get data from these tables using the select command. So let's go to SQL Server and show these examples. So we have our tables here which we just created, the book table which has these columns, and the chapter table which has these columns. But we focus on the book table, so let's just select new query, and then we can create the SQL query in order to insert data into these tables. Let's start insert some books in the book table. Insert into book table. And then we need to specify the columns: book title, summary. In this case, we don't need to include the book ID because it's automatically generated since we have set it to be an identity. Then next, insert the values, and then we could have a book called SQL Programming, and then enter a summary like this, and then we can just click on the execute button in order to insert the data into the table like this. Then you see one row affected, and then next we want to use a SQL query in order to retrieve data from the same table. So you just create a new query in this example, and now we use the select statement: select all from table name, which in this case is book, like this. So select all from book, and then you just execute, and then we see we get all the data within that table. Finally, I will show an example. So in this example, I have made a website or a web application. I used Visual Studio and the ASP.NET web framework and the C# programming language. And the database where the data is stored is SQL Server. So here is the first page where I have a list of books. And then I can create new books, and then I click this button. These windows appear where I can enter new books and click OK when I finished, and the book should be added to the list. Or I can click one of the existing books and click edit, and then I go to open this window in order to edit the specific information about that book, and click OK, and the information will be updated. Or I can click one of the rows and click delete book. So let's show this example and how it's worked. So here you see my web application. I have a list of books like this, and then I can click new book, and then I can enter new data like this. A title. So I just enter the title, etc., and then click OK. So I want to create a new book called SQL Programming. Select OK, and then this book has been added to the list, and then I can edit it like this, and the information will be updated. And then also I can want to delete it, clicking the delete button like this. And all this information here is stored in SQL Server. That's all for today, so good luck with your database development.